The cool autumn wind blew through the city of Boston, carrying the smell of change. Lena didn't know it yet, but things were about to be different. Her high heels clicked on the shiny marble floor as she walked through the big office building where her husband, Marco, worked. She held a lunch bag in her hand, a surprise for him. The security guard, Ramon, smiled at her as she walked in. He already had her access card ready before she even reached his desk. "You look lovely as always, Mrs. Thompson," Ramon said kindly. "Mr. Thompson has been in meetings all morning. He'll be happy to see you." Lena adjusted her pretty green dress and smiled. "Thank you, Ramon. How's Maria doing with the new baby?" "Growing fast," Ramon laughed, already trying to keep up with her sisters. He swiped Lena's card. 13th floor as always. The elevator doors closed. Lena looked at her reflection in the mirror. At 35, she still had the same beauty and grace that made Marco notice her years ago at a fancy charity party. Her dark skin glowed, and her natural hair was styled in a perfect updo that she had spent years perfecting, just like everything else in her life. When the elevator reached the executive floor, Lena walked through the quiet halls, nodding at people she knew. As she neared Marco's office, she noticed something strange. His assistant's desk was empty. Diana never took lunch this early. Lena's hand hesitated on the door handle. Through the frosted glass, she could see two people inside. One of them was Marco. But he was not alone. They were standing too close. Lena's heart pounded. The lunch bag felt heavy. She should walk away. She should pretend she didn't see anything. But her fingers pushed the handle, and the door swung open. Time slowed. Marco stood behind his desk, his tie loose. A young woman, Jenna Collins from the Marco-aiding team, was fixing her skirt. Their guilty faces told Lena everything. "Lena," Marco stammered. "I wasn't expecting you. We were just finishing a presentation for the Ricardo-san account." Jenna grabbed a folder, holding it like a shield. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s, full of confidence. Lena felt their eyes on her, waiting for her to scream or cry. Instead, she calmly placed the lunch bag on a chair. "I brought you lunch," she said in a steady voice. "But I see you're already satisfied." The words hung in the air like poison. Marco stepped forward, ready with an excuse. Lena raised her hand to stop him. Her wedding ring sparkled under the office lights. "Miss Collins," she said to Jenna, "your lipstick is smeared." Then she looked at Marco. "And darling, you might want to fix your collar before your meeting." Without waiting for a reply, Lena turned and walked out. Her steps were steady, her back straight. The door clicked shut behind her. She walked past Ramon, out into the crisp autumn air. Only when she reached her car did she let a single tear fall. Her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel. But inside her, something else stirred. Anger, strength. She deserved better. Her phone buzzed. Marco's name flashed on the screen again and again. She let it ring. Then she turned it off. Lena looked out at the city. She wouldn't talk to Marco yet. First, she needed to find herself again. The woman she was before she became Mrs. Thompson. The drive home was filled with swirling autumn leaves and racing thoughts. She remembered the big company gala coming up in 3 weeks. A perfect fancy event where Marco and all the executives showed off their lives. An idea started to form in her mind. At home, she didn't stop in the living room filled with expensive furniture. She went straight to her closet. Behind designer dresses, she found an old box labeled "Before." Inside were memories, pictures of her dancing, journals filled with dreams, pieces of the woman she used to be. She picked up her phone and made a call. "Aunt Rosa, it's Lena." She took a deep breath. "Remember when you told me I was losing myself? I think I'm ready to find my way back." Aunt Rosa's warm laugh filled the phone. "Baby girl, I've been waiting for this call. Come over tomorrow. We've got work to do." As the sun set over Boston, casting shadows in her perfect house, Lena began to plan. The corporate gala wouldn't be just another event. It would be her stage. Marco and Jenna had no idea what they had started. The next morning, Lena sat on Aunt Rosa's deck, holding a cup of sweet tea. The smell of fresh cornbread filled the air. "You haven't touched your tea, child," Aunt Rosa said. Lena sighed. "Marco called 17 times last night, left 12 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last." Aunt Rosa chuckled. "Men like him panic when they lose control. When did you start letting him have so much of it? I hope that works for you." Lena thought about the little changes over the years, how she stopped wearing bright colors because Marco liked neutral tones, how she gave up dancing because it didn't fit the image of an executive's wife. "I thought I was growing up," she said, "but I was just disappearing." Rosa pulled out an old photo album. She opened it to a picture of teenage Lena dancing with pure joy. "That girl knew who she was," Rosa said. "When's the last time you felt that free?" Lena traced the picture. "I used to dance every weekend. Mom said I had rhythm in my soul." Rosa nodded. "Your mother would be sad to see how much of yourself you've hidden. She raised you to be proud, strong, and fearless, not to shrink for any man." Lena's phone buzzed again. It was Diana, Marco's assistant. "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson is very worried. He asked me to check on you." Lena's voice was steady. "Tell him I'm perfectly fine. I'm reconnecting with my family." After hanging up, Lena turned to Rosa. "I need to get some things from the house. Marco will be at work late." Before she left, Rosa handed her a small wooden box. "Your mother wanted you to have this when you were ready. That time is now." Inside was a journal and a gold necklace. "She called this her strength chain," Rosa explained. "Every circle represents a strong woman in our family. Now, it's your turn to add to it." Lena felt the weight of it, not as a burden, but as an anchor. She drove home, looking in the mirror. She no longer saw just Marco's wife. She saw her mother's daughter, a woman ready to stand tall. She opened her laptop and typed 3 words, "Dance classes Roxbury." The first result made her smile. The community center where she used to dance still had classes. The next session started tomorrow. She booked it. Lena spent a long time trying to fix her hair before she remembered what Rosa had told her. She should hide her crown, so she pulled her hair back in a simple way. It felt strange, but also a little familiar. "Well, look who's back," a warm voice said, pulling Lena out of her thoughts. She turned and saw Katerina Rodriguez, her old dance teacher, walking toward her with open arms. Time had added gray streaks to Katerina's dark hair, but her eyes still shone with the same happiness Lena remembered. "Katerina," Lena said as she hugged the older woman, "I wasn't sure you'd still be teaching here." "This place is my home," Katerina said. She looked at Lena closely. "But you? Something's different. You have that look I see in many women who come here, like you're searching for something you lost." Before Lena could answer, the studio door opened. Lena's heart skipped a beat when she saw a familiar face. Diana, Marco's assistant. Their eyes met in the mirror, and Lena saw Diana recognize her. "Mrs. Thompson?" Diana asked, surprised. Her gym bag slipped off her shoulder. "Just Lena," Lena said, turning to her. "I didn't know you danced." Diana's cheeks turned red. "I started a few months ago. It helps with stress." She shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Thompson has been worried about you." Katerina raised her eyebrows at their conversation, but then clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "Ladies, circle up. Tonight, we're learning about rhythm and letting go. Sometimes we need to shake off what the world tells us and find our own way." The class began. At first, Lena's body felt stiff. It had been a long time since she had danced like this. But as Katerina led them through the moves, Lena's muscles started to remember. The beat of the drums filled the room, and Lena felt something inside her start to wake up. "Let the music move through you," Katerina called out. "Your body remembers who you are, even if your mind forgets." Lena started sweating as they moved faster. She saw herself in the mirror, sometimes moving freely, other times stopping as Marco's voice echoed in her head, reminding her about being proper and respectable. During a water break, Diana walked over hesitantly. "I won't tell Mr. Thompson I saw you here," she said quietly. "But he's not handling things well at work. Jenna tried to set up a meeting with him yesterday, and he almost threw his phone. Lena took a deep breath. Diana, how long have you worked for Marco? 3 years next month. And in those 3 years, has he ever asked about your life, your dreams, why you come here to dance? Diana didn't answer. That said enough. We all wear masks at work, Lena continued, but sometimes we wear them so long we forget who we really are. I'm done forgetting. Katerina called them back for a partner exercise. Lena and Diana faced each other, moving together. Mirror your partner's energy, Katerina said. Feel where they're holding tension, where they're finding freedom. As they danced, something changed in Diana's eyes. Maybe she realized that she and Lena weren't so different after all. Later, they took turns leading movements in the center of the floor. When it was Lena's turn, she hesitated. Then, remembering her mother's necklace around her neck, she let her body move the way it wanted. Her dance was bold, strong, and took up space. The women around her watched in awe. Even Katerina nodded approvingly. But what surprised Lena most was the way Diana looked at her, with admiration. At the end of class, Katerina had them sit in a circle. Close your eyes, she said. Feel the ground beneath you. You are supported not just by this floor, but by every woman who has ever danced here, every woman who has fought to find her own rhythm. Lena felt tears in her eyes. In the darkness, she could almost hear her mother's voice. She could hear Rosa's words about her heritage. After class, Katerina walked up to Lena with a knowing smile. You'll be back on Thursday, right? Lena nodded. Yes, I need to be ready for something important in a few weeks. Katerina's eyes twinkled. Honey, from what I saw today, you're ready for anything. You just need to trust yourself. In the parking lot, Diana caught up to Lena. What you said earlier about masks, she twisted her hands together. I've been keeping something for Mr. Thompson, receipts, hotel bookings, proof of his meetings with Jenna. He asked me to delete them, but I kept copies. I told myself it was just business, protecting the company. Lena placed a gentle hand on Diana's arm. You don't have to tell me this. I want to, Diana said, standing up straighter, because you're right. About the masks, about forgetting who we are, and maybe I need to remember too. They exchanged numbers. Something new was forming between them, a quiet alliance. When Lena got home, it was dark, but a package was waiting for her. Inside was an expensive dress for the gala, in the boring colors Marco liked. A note was attached. Let's put this unfortunate situation behind us, M. Lena carried the box to the guest room and shut the door. She had different plans for the gala. As she showered, she let the warm water soothe her tired muscles. The beat of the drums from class was still in her mind. She felt more alive than she had in years. She had 2 weeks until the gala, 2 weeks to reclaim every part of herself she had lost. Before bed, her phone lit up with a message from Marco. The board members are asking about you. Whatever point you're trying to make, isn't it time to come home? Lena touched her mother's necklace and smiled. She was already home, finding her way back to herself, one dance step at a time. 2 weeks later, Lena stepped out of her car in front of Anderson and Mitchell Consulting. She wasn't hiding anymore. She had chosen her outfit carefully. A bold red pantsuit that demanded attention, paired with her mother's necklace. Her hair was styled in a way that showed confidence, not obedience. The security desk was busy, but Ramon, the guard, noticed her immediately. Mrs. Thompson, haven't seen you in a while. He looked her over with a smile. Looking powerful today. Thank you, Ramon, Lena said warmly. Is Marco in his office? Yes, ma'am. Ramon lowered his voice. But things have been tense. Miss Collins from Marco Whitting was transferred to Denver last week. Very sudden, Lena nodded. So Jenna had left or been sent away. She stepped into the executive elevator. The mirrored walls reflected back a woman who looked taller, stronger. The 13th floor was buzzing with activity. Lena noticed people looking at her, some curious, some impressed, some nervous. She walked into Marco's office. He was on the phone but stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. Lena, you look. Like myself, she finished for him. We need to talk. Lena looked at Diana and said quietly, You didn't call in sick. Diana shook her head. I've been staying away from him since I told you about the papers. He knows something is wrong. He keeps watching me. Has he threatened you? Lena asked. Not directly, Diana said. But yesterday he told me how hard it is for someone my age to get a good job. Diana's hands were shaking as she pushed her coffee away. I need this job, Lena. My mom's medical bills. I know, Lena said, covering Diana's hand with her own. That's why we'll make sure you're safe. Have lunch with me. 20 minutes later, they sat in a small cafe near their office. Lena watched as Diana took a small USB drive from her purse. Everything is here, Diana said. Hotel receipts, expense reports he made me change, emails between him and Jenna. He made me book their trips as business meetings. But, she swallowed hard, the time, the places, it's all there. Lena took the USB drive carefully. Thank you. Not just for this, but for being brave. What will you do with it? Diana asked. Nothing for now, Lena said, putting the drive in her bag. But Marco needs to learn that actions have consequences. She took out her phone and sent an email to Diana. My friend runs a company and needs an assistant. The job pays more and has better benefits. Diana's eyes widened. Lena, I can't. You can, and you will, Lena said firmly but kindly. The interview is next Wednesday. That gives you time to quit before the gala. The gala? Diana bit her lip. Everyone is talking about it. The Ricardo-san account people will be there after what happened with Jenna. What happened? Lena asked. Diana leaned closer and whispered, She tried to use her relationship with Marco to get the lead on the Ricardo-san project. When he said no, she threatened to tell HR. Then suddenly, she got a big promotion to the Denver office. Lena thought about this. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together. And the Ricardo-san account? How safe is it? Not very, Diana said. They need a company they can trust. After their last CEO got in trouble, they care a lot about honesty. Later, in her car, Lena called Aunt Rosa. Aunt Rosa, remember how you said Mom built her business from nothing? Tell me more. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lena met with Rosa, her mother's old lawyer, and a business expert. By sunset, she had a plan. She touched her mother's necklace, feeling its meaning grow stronger. At home, she found another package from Marco. This time, it was a pair of diamond earrings with a note. To match your wedding set. Let's remember what's important. It's the earrings with the other gifts he had sent, gifts meant to keep her quiet. Then she opened her laptop and wrote 2 emails. One to Ricardo asking for a private meeting, the other accepting an offer to join the board of a local youth program. Her phone buzzed. It was Katerina. Ready for the next level tomorrow? Special music is coming. Lena smiled, thinking about how alive she felt in dance class. Ready for anything, she replied. Everything was coming together, but not in the way Marco expected. In 2 weeks, his company and their marriage would face the truth. Lena touched her necklace, thinking of all the strong women in her family. The time for hiding was over. The time for truth had come. That evening, Lena walked into Ricardo's office. The city lights twinkled behind him. He looked curious. Lena, your email surprised me. You never cared about business before. I never had a reason to, Lena said, placing a thick folder on his desk. But things change. Walsh opened the folder and raised his eyebrows as he read. These are serious problems. Expense reports, company rule breaking. He looked up sharply. Does Marco know you're here? My husband made his choices, Lena said. I'm making mine. The Ricardo-san account, Walsh began, could be lost if this goes public, Lena finished. That's why I'm bringing it to you first. Walsh sighed and looked out the window. Why now, Lena? And don't tell me this is just about honesty. Lena stood next to him. Because I believe in consequences. People in this company have used others, treated loyalty like something they can buy. She looked at him. Did you know my mother ran her own consulting firm? She helped businesses do the right thing. She died 5 years ago, but people still remember her honesty. Walsh nodded, understanding now. The Ricardoson group asked for a diverse leadership team. Instead of promoting the right people, Marco, he stopped, letting Lena finish the thought. We both know how that ended, Lena said. And Diana Mitchell, have you looked at her resume? She's been working on the Ricardoson portfolio. She has great ideas. Marco's assistant? Walsh looked surprised. Who has an MBA and 3 years of experience with top accounts? Lena said. She's quitting tomorrow for a better job, unless we give her a reason to stay. Walsh nodded. You've planned this well. Lena smiled. I learned from the best. I don't want revenge, Ricardo. I want to fix what's broken. They talked for hours. When Lena finally left, she felt lighter. Things were about to change. Driving past the community center, she saw Katerina teaching a young girl to dance. Lena watched, remembering her own younger days in that studio. Her phone buzzed. Marco had texted, "The Ricardoson team wants dinner before the gala. We need to be a team." Another text came in from Diana. Marco's in closed-door meetings all afternoon. Something is wrong with the account numbers. Lena smiled. Everything was going as planned. At home, another package waited. Inside was a diamond choker with a note. Please, for both our sakes. Lena added it to her growing pile of peace offerings. She wasn't for sale. Her phone lit up. A message from Rosa. Everything's ready. Your mother would be proud. Lena wiped off her makeup and stared in the mirror. The woman looking back was different. Not because of makeup or fancy clothes, but because of purpose. That night, she pushed furniture aside in the living room. A familiar song played from her phone. She danced, not for Marco, not for revenge, but for herself. She danced because after 12 years of silence, she was finally free. Her mother's necklace caught the light as she twirled. Lena could almost see generations of strong women dancing with her. In 2 days, everything would change, but tonight she danced to the rhythm of truth. The next day, Boston was warm. Lena stood in Aunt Rosa's sewing room as Rosa fixed her dress. Hold still, child, Rosa said with pins in her mouth. This hem needs to be perfect for what you're planning. The dress was everything. Lena had dreamed of a beautiful dress in deep purple. It sparkled in the light and looked magical. It was very different from the plain dresses Marco liked. This dress was special. It hugged her body and then flowed into a skirt that would move beautifully when she danced. The Ricardo group said they are coming, Lena said, checking her phone. All 7 board members and their CEO. Rosa, who was working on Lena's dress, hummed and asked, And your husband? How is he handling the pressure? Lena sighed. Diana says he's barely keeping it together. The numbers in the business account don't make sense, and Ricardo is asking questions no one can answer. A knock on the door interrupted them. Katerina walked in, holding a garment bag. Sorry, I'm late. Traffic was terrible. She stopped and looked at Lena's dress. Oh, honey, you're going to amaze everyone tomorrow night. Lena smiled, remembering their practice that morning. She had worked hard on the dance she would perform at the gala. It was a mix of grace and power. No one would doubt who she really was after tomorrow. Did the DJ confirm the music change? Lena asked. Katerina nodded. Right after the first dance, you'll know when it's your turn. She unzipped her bag, revealing a fancy dress. Are you sure you want me there? These fancy business parties aren't really my thing. You're not just my dance teacher, Katerina. You helped me find myself again, Lena said, holding her friend's hand. Besides, as the youth program director, you should be there when we announce the new partnership. Rosa looked up from the hem of Lena's dress. Speaking of partnerships, that nice man from the Ricardoson group called again. He wanted to confirm your breakfast meeting. Lena's phone buzzed. A message from Marco. The car will pick us up at 7. Wear the blue dress I sent. The Ricardos are traditional people. Traditional, Lena whispered, touching her mother's necklace. That's one way to put it. Katerina raised an eyebrow. What's the real story there? Lena explained. The Ricardoson Group is one of the biggest investment firms owned by minorities. They want to work with companies that truly care about diversity and fairness, Rosa added, which makes your husband's choices even more interesting. Lena's phone buzzed again. A message from Diana. Emergency board meeting just ended. Mr. Walsh asked tough questions about the account. Mr. Thompson looked ready to explode. Lena took a deep breath. Everything is falling into place. Rosa stopped sewing and looked at Lena. Remember what your mother always said, the truth is not always comfortable, but it is always right. You're not breaking anything that wasn't already broken, baby girl. Katerina looked out the window at the darkening sky. Are you sure about the timing? Once you start this dance, there's no turning back. Lena nodded firmly. I'm sure. Marco thinks tomorrow night is about keeping up appearances. He doesn't know it's about finally being seen. They worked late into the night. Rosa made final touches on the dress, and Katerina helped Lena go over the dance steps one last time. Lena's phone kept buzzing with messages from Marco, Deanna, and Ricardo. Each message was a piece of the plan she had carefully created. At midnight, Lena finally went home, carrying her dress carefully. The house was dark, but Marco's car was in the driveway. She found him in his office, surrounded by papers. He looked tired and worried. Where have you been? He asked without looking up. Tomorrow is the most important night of our careers, and you're out doing who knows what. Getting ready, Lena said calmly. How are the numbers looking? Marco gripped his pen tightly. Fine. Everything's fine. Just wear the blue dress I got you and remember what's at stake. Lena turned to leave, then stopped. By the way, I ran into Ricardo today. He mentioned something interesting about the Ricardo-san group's diversity requirements. Marco's shoulders stiffened, but Lena didn't wait for his response. She went to the guest room to get ready for the morning. Sleep would be hard, but she needed to be well rested for what was coming. Her phone lit up again with a message from Rosa. Your mother faced bigger storms than this. Get some rest. Tomorrow, you dance. Lena lay in bed, listening to Marco pacing angrily in his office. She thought about Diana, Katerina, the kids at the community center, and her mother's legacy. She thought about all the women who had stayed silent to keep the peace, but not anymore. In less than 24 hours, everything would change. The truth about Anderson and Mitchell Consulting would come out. The Ricardo-san account would find its true home. And Lena would finally be herself. She touched her mother's necklace, feeling its warmth. In the quiet darkness, she began to hum the rhythm of the dance she would perform tomorrow. Each note was a step closer to freedom. Each beat reminded her of who she really was. Down the hall, Marco's office door slammed. Glass shattered. His world was already falling apart, and he didn't even know it yet. Tomorrow would bring a storm, but Lena smiled in the darkness. In her dreams, she was already dancing. The grand ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel sparkled like a crystal palace. Chandeliers filled the room with golden light. The floor was shiny marble, and the tables were covered in silk. Lena stood in the powder room, adjusting her dress. The deep purple fabric shimmered in the light. Outside, the other guests wore plain designer dresses, but Lena stood out. Mrs. Thompson? A soft voice came from the doorway. It was Marta, a junior accountant. Mr. Thompson is asking for you. The Ricardo-san group just arrived. Lena looked at herself in the mirror and touched her mother's necklace for courage. Thank you, Marta. I'll be right there. She heard the orchestra warming up, the voices of Boston's business elite filling the ballroom. Checking her phone one last time, she saw messages from Katerina, Diana, and Rosa. Everything was ready. As the ballroom doors opened, people turned to look at her. Conversations stopped. She felt their surprise and admiration. Marco stood with the Ricardo-san group, his smile faltering when he saw her. For a moment, panic flashed across his face before he forced himself to act normal. Lena, darling, you look unexpected. She smiled. Life is full of surprises. Andrea Reyes, the CEO, stepped forward warmly. Lena, you look absolutely stunning. That color was made for you. Thank you, Lena said. It reminds me of what my mother always said, wear your truth boldly. Marco's grip on her waist tightened. Shall we find our table? The first dance is starting soon. Actually, Andrea said, Lena and I had an interesting talk over breakfast. We're discussing a partnership to honor her mother's legacy. Marco's face turned pale. A partnership? Lena patted his arm. All in good time. First, you promised me a dance. The music started, and Marco led her to the dance floor. His movements were stiff, his smile forced. Other couples joined them. Ricardo and his wife gave Lena a small nod. What are you playing at? Marco hissed as they moved. Breakfast was supposed to fix things. No, Lena said calmly. It was about truth. The music changed. A deeper, richer beat filled the room. Lena let go of Marco's hand. Lena, what are you doing? Marco asked, his voice shaking. Lena smiled. Dancing. She stepped onto the floor alone, moving with power and grace. The crowd watched in awe. Katerina cheered from the sidelines. Show them who you are. Diana was working on her tablet, and soon images started showing up on the screen. Documents, reports, emails. They told a story about bad things happening in a company, like lying and cheating. But while this was happening, Lena kept dancing. Her movements were like a counterpoint to the bad things being uncovered. Lena saw when Marco noticed the screens and rushed toward Diana, but Ricardo stopped him. The music in the room was loud, and it matched the revealing of the lies and secrets. Some people from the company gathered around Andrea, looking at the evidence with serious faces. Others were trying to fix the situation, but it was too late. The truth was coming out, and the company's perfect image was falling apart. Meanwhile, Lena kept dancing. Her movements told a different story, a story about changing for the better. She felt free and strong, something she hadn't felt in years. She danced across the floor as people around her started to argue and talk about the scandal. When the music finally stopped, Lena stood strong in the middle of the room. Everyone was quiet, except for the sound of slow clapping. Andrea Reyes stepped forward, smiling proudly. Now this is what I call good leadership, she said. Lena touched her mother's necklace, feeling the strength of the women in her family. The storm she had planned was happening, and she was finally being her true self. Afterward, Marco's face looked very angry, almost like a mask of fear. He tried to get to Lena, but others stepped in the way. Lena stood tall, not afraid. Actually, Marco, I know exactly what I've done, she said. I've told the truth. Andrea, in charge, spoke up, saying they needed to talk privately. She directed Marco to another room with the board members. Lena caught Diana's eye across the room. They had planned everything carefully, and the truth was clear. Katerina, standing beside Lena, said, You did it, girl. Every step was perfect. Lena nodded, watching as the company leaders were already talking about how to deal with the scandal. A familiar person came over. Aunt Rosa, wearing a shiny gold gown. Your mom would be so proud, she said, hugging Lena tightly. Every ancestor in that necklace is dancing with joy right now. Lena smiled, feeling grateful for the support. Later, a junior associate came in saying Dr. Ricardoson wanted to see Lena in the blue room. The room was full of people working hard on the evidence that Diana had collected. Marco was sitting at the table, his hands on his head, while Ricardo spoke quietly with other board members. When Lena entered, Andrea smiled. Impeccable timing, she said, offering Lena a chair. They started talking about what to do next. Marco looked at Lena. Whatever you think you're proving, he started, but Ricardo stopped him. You've done enough damage, he said, and turned to Lena. The board owes you an apology. We should have seen this sooner. Lena replied, It's not about apologies, it's about making things right. For the next hour, Lena shared her plan. She suggested starting a new division focused on ethical business practices and giving opportunities to people who hadn't been treated fairly before. She mentioned Diana, who had been stuck in a lower position even though she was qualified, because she refused to play Marco's dishonest games. Andrea smiled, clearly impressed. Marco laughed bitterly. "So this is your revenge?" he asked. Lena calmly answered, "No, Marco. This is me building something new and real." Andrea added, "The evidence is already with the SEC. You have until morning to decide how to handle it." Lena told the board, "We'll find a new home for your account with a team that reflects our values." Andrea shook Lena's hand. "Shall we discuss this over dinner next week?" The meeting continued late into the night, but Lena felt peaceful. Through the windows, she could see the ballroom, with people still dancing as if everything was normal. But nothing would ever be the same after that night. When Lena left the meeting, Katerina and Rosa were waiting for her. The ballroom was mostly empty, but a few groups were still talking about the events. "Ready to go home?" Rosa asked. Lena looked around the ballroom, where her marriage had ended, and her new life had begun. "Not to that house," Lena replied. "I packed what I needed this morning." Rosa smiled and assured her, "Your room's ready." As they walked through the hotel, Lena's purple dress caught people's attention. At the entrance, she stopped and looked back at the ballroom. "The community center board meets tomorrow," Katerina reminded her. "They're excited about the new youth program." Lena smiled, thinking about all the young dancers who would benefit from it. "Mom always said real change starts from the ground up," she said. Outside, the Boston night felt full of possibility. Lena's phone buzzed with a message from Diana. "Ricardo-san Group offered me a director position. Thank you for showing me how to be brave." Lena felt proud. In Rosa's car, she finally relaxed, letting go of all the tension. Rosa spoke. "Your mom faced a choice like this once, between keeping up appearances and living her truth. What did she choose?" Lena smiled. "She chose truth," she said, feeling her mother's strength. The next day, Lena sat in Andrea's office, looking over paperwork for the new consulting division. "Your mother would have loved the irony," Andrea said. They were setting up an institute for corporate ethics in her mother's name. Lena smiled, thinking about how the company had changed since the scandal. Marco had resigned, and an investigation was underway. People were now talking about how businesses should be more responsible. Diana walked in, now a director, smiling proudly. "The community center approved the expanded youth program," she said. Lena felt proud of Diana and proud of herself. The dance program she had started would help other young people find themselves, just like it had helped Lena. Katerina was already working on a new curriculum for the program. Andrea asked if Lena had found a place to live. Lena showed her a picture of her mother's old house, which she had bought and was planning to renovate. "Perfect location for our new office," Andrea said, impressed. A knock at the door interrupted them, and Ricardo entered. He said the company was restructuring and bringing in some of the changes Lena and her mother had advocated for. "We miss you at the galas," he said. Lena replied, "I dance different steps now." After Ricardo left, Diana stayed behind. "The SEC wants another statement about the reports," she said. Lena's voice was firm. "Give them whatever they need. No more hidden truths." As Lena left the office, she felt a new sense of peace. She had done the right thing. When she arrived at the community center, she saw the kids dancing. One of the girls was struggling with a step. "You're fighting it in your shoulders," Lena called out, showing her how to do it right. "Sometimes you have to trust your body to lead you where you need to go." Katerina watched with a smile. "Look who's becoming a teacher," Lena smiled. "I had good examples," she said. Then she told the class about the mentorship program that would bring in top executives to talk about their journeys. One of the girls asked, "Will you tell us your story?" Lena touched her mother's necklace. "Our stories are still being written, but yes, I'll tell you about the night I remembered who I was." Later, in Rosa's kitchen, Lena went over plans for the house renovation. The news in the background talked about the changes in the business world. Rosa teased Lena about a CEO who had been calling her. Not yet, Lena said. I have to finish this chapter of my story first. Her phone buzzed with a message from Katerina. The girls want to prepare a special performance for the Institute's opening. Another text followed saying that the Wall Street Journal wanted an interview with Lena. Rosa asked, "Do you remember what your mom used to say about change?" Lena smiled. "It's like a dance," she replied. "You have to learn the steps before you can make them your own." As they drove through the city, Lena felt like she was part of the rhythm of Boston, a city always moving. She was no longer Marco's wife, no longer the quiet woman. She was her own person, and her dance had just begun. 6 months after the big gala, Lena stood in her mother's old house, now restored and full of light. The house had been brought back to life, just like Lena. The sunlight filled the room, and she felt at home. Family photos decorated the walls, showing stories of strong women in the family. Now, new pictures of change and success were added. The doorbell rang, and Andrea Reyes arrived early for the last meeting before the Elena Bradford Institute opened. Lena welcomed her into the office, where the big windows now looked out over the garden. Rosa had helped make the garden beautiful. Andrea smiled and said, "The clock looks amazing," as she sat in one of the comfy chairs. But then she asked, "I noticed you didn't mention Marco. His story isn't yours anymore?" Lena nodded, pouring coffee into her mother's old cups. "The divorce was finalized yesterday. Marco's moving to Chicago for a new job," Lena explained. Andrea nodded, thinking, "And the SEC investigation is over. The company has to follow new rules now." Lena smiled. "Yes, the rules my mom used to talk about." Suddenly, they heard voices from the garden. Katerina was leading a group of young dancers practicing. The youth program at the Institute was doing really well, with many companies in Boston offering help. "I can't believe it's already been 6 months," Andrea said, watching the dancers. "The Ricardo-san Group's stock is up by 20% since we announced the partnership. Turns out being ethical is good for business." Lena touched the necklace her mom used to wear, now with a small purple dancer charm that Rosa gave her. "It was never about the business, though, right?" she said softly. Andrea agreed. "It was always about truth, speaking it, living it, dancing it." The doorbell rang again, and Diana came in with papers for the opening ceremony. Behind her, Ricardo, a new member of the Institute's board, walked in. "The guest list for tonight is amazing," Diana said, spreading papers across the desk. "CEOs, diversity leaders, ethics committees, and all the dance students from the community center." Lena nodded. "We're building bridges, not walls." The day went by quickly, with meetings and check-ins. Lena moved from one thing to the next, making sure everything was ready. The house was busy, with people in suits talking to young dancers in their practice clothes. Rosa arrived with lunch, and the mood became warmer and more like family. "Your mom always said you can't talk about truth on an empty stomach," Rosa said, setting out food. As they ate, Lena looked around. There was Andrea talking about mentoring, Katerina sharing wisdom, Deanna explaining financial ideas, and Rosa teaching anyone who wanted to listen. This was what transformation looked like, not just changing yourself, but changing others' lives too. Rosa quietly mentioned Miguel called again. Lena smiled, thinking about the charming CEO who had invited her to dinner. Maybe it's time to take that dance, she thought. As the afternoon went on, more people arrived. Reporters and community leaders came to hear about the Institute. Lena gave interviews in the garden, and the reporters asked her how it felt to return to her roots while changing Boston's business world. Lena smiled and said, "It feels like truth, like finally moving to the right rhythm." As evening came, Lena went to her mother's old room to get ready for the big event. 2 dresses hung there, one from the gala and one for tonight, both reminders of courage. Rosa came in with a small box. Inside was a tiny key charm for Lena's necklace. "Your mom always said truth was the key to everything," Rosa said. Lena added it to her necklace, feeling the warmth of the metal against her skin. She looked in the mirror and saw not just her reflection, but also the legacy of all the women who helped her. Her mom, Rosa, Katerina, Andrea, and even the young dancers who showed her why this work mattered. The opening ceremony was amazing. Lena watched her students perform their dance, telling stories of change and truth. Business leaders who once didn't believe in her mother's ideas now supported the Institute's programs. Young professionals who had faced challenges felt hope because of the mentorship program being unveiled. When it was Lena's turn to speak, she stood tall, with the same grace she had when she danced. My mother used to say that change is like a dance, she said. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow, but you always move with conviction. She talked about the importance of truth, transformation, and community. The Elena Bradford Institute isn't just about business ethics, she said. It's about creating spaces where everyone can dance their truth, where young leaders can learn to move with power and grace. Afterward, Lena went to the garden, away from the celebration. Katerina found her there. "Are you ready for your class tomorrow?" Katerina asked. "The students can't wait to learn that new combination." Lena smiled. "I'm ready." Inside, the music played and people mingled. Leaders in business suits, community members, experienced workers, and young students, all moving to the rhythm of possibility. Lena touched the necklace her mom had worn, feeling the weight of the three charms: the circles of family, the dancer of transformation, and the key of truth. She had come home in every way that mattered, not just to her mother's house, but to the truth that had always lived inside her. The dance that began at the gala 6 months ago hadn't ended. It had grown, changed, and invited others to join in. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, Lena stood in her mother's garden, surrounded by the legacy she had reclaimed and the future she was creating. She felt peace, knowing she was in harmony with her truth. If you were Lena, would you have the courage to share your husband's betrayal in such a public way at an important event, knowing it could affect your marriage and the company? Or would you choose a quieter way to handle the situation? Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.